What if some of the most important genetic highways in Eurasian history didn't come from the places we usually think of, like Rome or Greece or even China, but from a place that maybe for many is kind of a blank spot on the map? Today we're diving into something really fascinating, Kazakhstan. You might think Genghis Khan, horsemen, the Silk Road, all that epic stuff. But researchers, they're now calling this huge territory one of the most genetically critical places on Earth. So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack why. Why is Kazakhstan considered this hidden genetic highway, a place where empires literally smashed into each other, where nomads shaped the world, and where DNA, well, it just spread everywhere like wildfire? We've pulled together some incredible sources, genetic studies, historical analyses to explore this whole ancestral puzzle. And honestly, the story in the DNA here, it's like nothing else.
It really is a unique story. And, to build on that, Kazakhstan's geography alone is immense, right across Central Asia. It's a natural crossroads. But the history wasn't just political deals or big battles. It was deeply, profoundly etched into the DNA of the people themselves. So we'll be looking at what the scientists have found, what historians are stressing, and what really decades of studies reveal about this incredibly rich genetic legacy. And it's a legacy that's still shaping how we understand Eurasia, even, wider human migration patterns.
Okay, let's unpack this. There's that fact, maybe you've heard it, but it still kind of stops you, the idea that 1 in 200 men worldwide, that's like, 16 million men today?
Yeah.
Believed to descend from Genghis Khan. It's just a staggering thought, right? The scale of that footprint. Mind-boggling. But here's the twist, the really interesting part for our dive today. A huge chunk of that legacy, those millions of descendants, they're concentrated right there in modern-day Kazakhstan. It makes you ask, why there specifically?
Well, what's fascinating is the specificity of that concentration. And it's not just a belief. There's solid genetic evidence. Scientists found the C3Y DNA haplogroup. And just quickly, a haplogroup is like a genetic signature passed down the male line. Think of it as an ancient surname in your DNA. Well, this C3 occurs in what they call an astronomical concentration. We're talking up to 35% in certain Kazakh male clans. That specific marker. Now, 35% within specific groups, that's enormous in genetic terms. It points to a very powerful, very rapid expansion of, well, a single male lineage.
35%. Wow, that's incredible. So it's not just spread out thinly, it's really focused. But tell us, is this C3 haplogroup, is it definitely Genghis Khan's mark? Or is there like some debate?
That's a really crucial point. And yes, there is ongoing debate among scientists. C3c is strongly linked, very strongly associated with Genghis Khan's lineage, yes. But some researchers argue it might actually predate him. They suggest it could come from elite male line expansions of even older steppe warlords, maybe Bronze Age, maybe even earlier, warlords who also had, huge reproductive success through conquest. So the exact origin, still being refined, still being debated.
Okay, so the jury's still out on the exact source, maybe.
Right. But here's the key thing. Regardless of whether that specific haplogroup is only Genghis Khan's or it represents an older, powerful line, this concentration absolutely proves something major. Kazakhstan wasn't just passively ruled by history. Its people, through their genes, actively wrote that history. These huge male lineage expansions, whether Genghis Khan or earlier chiefs, they profoundly shaped the whole genetic landscape, not just locally, but way beyond, creating this kind of biological dynasty that echoed across continents.
That idea of genetically writing history, that's powerful, especially with the C3 finding. But as you mentioned, Kazakhstan wasn't only shaped by conquest. It was also this hub for trade, a superhighway of genes in a totally different way.
Absolutely. That military side, that's just one part of the picture. Because this land, it wasn't just forged by conquerors, it was also shaped by thousands of years of commerce, of cultural exchange. And that brings us straight to the Silk Road. Kazakhstan wasn't some isolated place. Far from it. This area was, like you said, the ultimate superhighway of genes for millennia.
Yeah, I love that picture it paints. You can almost see it, can't you? Imagine the ancient Silk Road, not just camels and silk, but this living river of people. Merchants arguing over prices, scholars carrying texts, maybe refugees looking for safety, soldiers, all crossing this vast land.
And leaving more than just tracks in the dust, they were leaving their mark in the DNA of the locals. Precisely. And this constant movement, it wasn't just about, economics or armies. It led to what scientists call a remarkable genetic fusion. Studies today show that modern Kazakhs have roughly 60–70% East Eurasian ancestry. That means genetic markers linked to populations like Mongolic and Turkic nomads from the East. But crucially, they also carry a really significant chunk, 30–40%, of West Eurasian ancestry. This includes elements we can trace back to ancient Indo-Europeans, like the Scythians and Iranians who came from the West.
So hang on, a single person today in Kazakhstan could genuinely have genetic markers that are common in, say, ancient Tibetan nomads and ancient Persian nobles.
Yeah.
That spectrum is just incredible. What does this geopolitically layered DNA tell us beyond just saying people are diverse?
Oh, it's much more than just diversity. If you think about the bigger picture, this geopolitically layered DNA, it means the genetic makeup of modern Kazakhs is basically a living history book, a record of ancient global interactions. It shows us how cultures, technologies, even farming practices didn't just spread on maps, they spread biologically too. Imagine, maybe genetic resistance to certain diseases traveled along the Silk Road, or adaptations to cold, harsh climates. It's proof that this region really was a melting pot, a genetic crossroads of, frankly, monumental importance. The very biology of the people was shaped by their central place in Eurasia. This layering gives us insights into ancestry, sure, but also into how human societies evolved and adapted.
Okay, now here's where it gets really fascinating for me, almost a paradox.
Yeah.
Despite all this mixing from the Silk Road, this incredible fusion you just described, Kazakh society somehow managed to keep a surprisingly strong internal genetic structure. How? How do you have thousands of years of blending from outside, yet still maintain these clear internal lines?
Yeah, that's the fascinating part. And that's where the history and the social structure become absolutely critical. Historically, Kazakhs belong to three main zoos. Think of them as huge confederations of tribes, like ancient commonwealths, the great, middle, and little hordes. Each zoos had its own distinct clans, its own lineages. And these weren't just, political or economic groups. They played a massive role in actively maintaining male line DNA purity over centuries, even with all that external genetic stuff coming in.
Okay, maintaining purity.
Yeah.
How did they actually do that? Were there specific rules or systems?
Absolutely. It worked through deeply ingrained social rules, especially around marriage. For example, marrying within your own direct clan was often forbidden for many, many generations. This forced people to marry outside their immediate father line, but often within their larger zoos or maybe a closely allied clan. So it created this really interesting dynamic. New genes from all sorts of groups could enter the wider Kazakh population, but the male lines within specific tribes, they were carefully traced and preserved. There was a famous study back in 2015 that really showed this clearly. It found that within certain specific Kazakh tribes, over 80% of the men shared a single paternal ancestor. Think about that.
80% from one ancestor.
80%. It's powerful evidence. It points to this really deep-rooted tribal identity that actively resisted or at least channeled the blending in their paternal lines, even after centuries of empires rising and falling and people moving all across their lands.
So, okay, this is the unusual paradox then. Kazakhstan has one of the most genetically mixed populations anywhere, reflecting all this global interaction. But at the same time, many Kazakhs have this incredibly traceable, consistent Y DNA line through their tribe. It really makes you think, doesn't it, about how identity and genetics weave together in these really complex, surprising ways. Does this paradox make us question what identity even means?
I think it absolutely does. It forces us to reconsider how we define identity. Is it purely cultural? Or is there this persistent biological thread, even when there's been millennia of mixing? What does it tell us about maybe human resilience? Or the desire to maintain kinship, even genetically, through systems like the zoos? Perhaps it's a testament to the power of social structures to sort of override or maybe guide the natural flow of genes, directing how and way they mix. It's a living example of how deeply history and social norms can impact our biology.
And now for something that's, well, a pretty controversial twist in this story. Imagine a place of such huge genetic importance being basically off-limits to science for a whole century. During the Soviet era, genetic research in Central Asia, Kazakhstan included, was largely suppressed. Moscow was focused on political control, on pushing a unified Soviet identity, not exploring the messy, diverse ethnic histories of its republics. This suppression meant that decades of potential genetic insights were either lost forever or just never studied. Think of the loss. An irreversible loss to understanding human history.
It was a huge roadblock, definitely, a kind of scientific dark age for the region's genetics. It really wasn't until the 1990s and 2000s, after the Soviet Union collapsed, that Western scientists and local researchers could finally start mapping Kazakh DNA properly. And when they did, yeah, what they started finding genuinely shocked them.
Shocked them. Okay, what kind of discoveries were coming out after that long silence?
They were pretty profound, really opened up new chapters. For instance, they found multiple rare mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, mtDNA being the genetic signature passed down the female line, giving us another angle on ancient migrations. Many of these mtDNA types had just never been seen before in Central Asia. There was also startling evidence of ancient mixing with Denisovans.
Denisovans, right. That's not a household name. Remind us, who were they?
Denisovans were an extinct group of ancient humans, sort of distant cousins to Neanderthals. We only really know about them from tiny bone fragments and the DNA extracted from them, mostly found in Siberia. So finding their genetic traces in Kazakh DNA, it puts Kazakhstan right at a critical point in the story of how our species interacted with other ancient hominins, much earlier, perhaps, than we thought for this specific region. They also found these isolated genetic markers, things common in places as far apart as Siberia, Tibet, even Northern Europe, which highlights migration routes and connections we just hadn't fully grasped before.
So many connections.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the most crucial point here, I think, is that even with these breakthroughs, Kazakhstan today remains understudied genetically. It's surprising, but true. Despite its pivotal location, its huge territory likely holds keys to understanding how modern Eurasians came to be, how we all got here. We are probably only just scratching the surface of what its genetic landscape can tell us about ancient migrations, interactions, maybe even the origins of major populations across the continent. There are still so many stories hidden in that DNA.
That's fascinating and, yeah, also a bit frustrating, thinking about the secrets still locked away because of that lost time. But it's not just about ancient history, is it? This isn't only about the distant past. Kazakhstan's genes, they affect the present in really tangible ways. This old genetic tapestry still influences health, lives, today.
Oh, absolutely. We see it playing out in specific medical and evolutionary contexts, things that are direct echoes of their ancestors' lives. For example, certain regions in Kazakhstan show higher frequencies of genes linked to lactose intolerance. Now, that might sound like a negative, but it's really an evolutionary adaptation, or rather, the lack of a specific later adaptation. For nomadic people, dairy was vital, right? But the ability to digest fresh milk lactose into adulthood, that's lactose persistence, isn't actually the default human state. So this higher frequency suggests that while many relied on fermented dairy, like yogurt or kefir, which are lower in lactose, not everyone developed full persistence for fresh milk. It preserves that ancient trait.
Interesting. So it reflects their specific dietary history.
Exactly. And conversely, other populations show genetic resistance to cold stress and hypoxia, that's lack of oxygen. These are adaptations quite similar to what you see in Tibetan or Andean peoples living at high altitudes. It clearly points to long periods of environmental pressure shaping their genes for survival out there on the harsh steppe.
That's a really powerful link, lifestyle to biology. But you also mentioned something about mental health, epigenetic changes. That sounds like a whole other level.
It really is, and it's a very new frontier. Beyond those more classic evolutionary adaptations, there's emerging research looking at mental health gene expression in Kazakh populations, and it seems tied to what we call epigenetic changes. Now, epigenetics is fascinating stuff. It's basically how our environment, our experiences, can actually switch genes on or off without changing the DNA code itself. Think of it like turning the volume dial up or down on certain genes.
So experience can change how our genes work.
In a way, yes. So researchers are exploring how the immense collective trauma of the post-Soviet period, the economic collapse, the social chaos, the identity crisis might have left a biological mark. How it might influence the way certain genes related to stress or resilience or maybe even susceptibility to some mental health issues are expressed in people today. This is a really complex, vital field. It merges genetics, sociology, psychology, and it shows just how deeply history, even very recent history, can impact our biological present and maybe even our future. It's a powerful reminder our genes aren't static. They're dynamic records of everything, our deep past, our recent experiences, our environments. So why is the Kazakh gene pool so special? To sum it up, because it's a living history book. That's the best way I can put it. It holds the footprints of Persian traders, Mongol warriors, Aryan charioteers, Soviet factory builders, Bronze Age nomads. It's a testament to every single group, every movement, every clash that swept across the Eurasian steppe. It's this incredible genetic story about human resilience, about adaptation, and about how interconnected we all really are.
Exactly. It hammers home that broader message, doesn't it? DNA isn't just about where your dot is on the map today. It's about who moved through your land, who decided to stay, who blended in, and ultimately who survived. Kazakhstan's DNA is this powerful, really compelling reminder that maybe we are all, in some small way, children of the steppe, connected by these ancient pathways. So what does all this mean for you, listening right now? Does tracing this ancient DNA, does it help national identity? Does it hurt it? Does it complicate it? Are we ready, really, to face what science tells us about who we truly are, about our incredibly complex, often really surprising ancestral stories? Even if, it goes against popular beliefs or messes with the simple narratives we thought we knew, it's definitely something to ponder, how our own small stories are woven into this huge, ancient, global tapestry.